Hello, let's go.
You said. In an unprecedented move that has shaken global energy markets and sparked political uproar, Canada has announced an immediate halt to oil exports to the United States. The decision, which affects about $103.3 billion in trade, is in response to President Donald Trump's administration's imposition of a 25% tariff on Canadian imports. The move has profound implications for both economies and the global oil market. Canada's preemptive decision. Relations between Canada and the United States have soured after President Trump announced a 25% tariff on imports from Canada and Mexico, citing the need to protect American manufacturers and combat illegal immigration and drug trafficking. Canada, the largest supplier of oil to the United States, has seen the move as unfriendly and economically unjustified. Canadian Prime Minister Justin Trudeau said that such actions by the U.S. violate the principles of free trade and undermine trust between countries. In response, Canada developed a list of U.S. goods worth $105 billion on which it was planned to impose retaliatory tariffs. The decision to stop oil exports. However, instead of imposing tariffs, the Canadian government decided to take a more radical step, a complete cessation of oil exports to the U.S. This decision came as a shock to many analysts, since Canada provided more than 60% of U.S. oil imports, which amounted to about 4 million barrels per day. Reaction of the U.S. and President Trump. Canada's announcement caused a stormy reaction in the White House. According to reports, President Trump held an emotionally charged meeting in the Oval Office, expressing indignation and dissatisfaction with Canada's decision. He called the move unfair and hostile, stressing that the United States was considering all possible responses. Trump also noted that Canada's decision would harm not only the American economy but also Canadians themselves. Impact on oil markets and the economy. The cessation of Canadian oil exports to the United States has led to a sharp increase in oil prices on world markets. Experts warned that gasoline prices in the United States could reach record levels, which would negatively affect consumers and could cause inflationary pressure on the economy. American refineries that specialize in processing heavy Canadian oil will face difficulties in finding alternative suppliers. AP News. Canada deepens cooperation with Europe and Asia. In response to trade restrictions from the United States, Canada has stepped up efforts to diversify its energy markets. The Trans Mountain Pipeline expansion allows Canada to increase its oil exports to Asian countries such as China, Japan, and South Korea. In addition, negotiations are underway with European countries to supply Canadian oil, which could reduce dependence on the American market. Political and economic implications. Canada's decision highlights the growing tensions in relations between the two countries and could have far-reaching consequences for the North American Free Trade Agreement, NAFTA. Prime Minister Trudeau has called an emergency cabinet meeting to discuss the next steps and develop a strategy to minimize the negative impact on the Canadian economy. At the same time, U.S. lawmakers are calling on the Trump administration to review trade policy and find ways to resolve the conflict. Conclusion. Canada's cessation of oil exports to the United States is an unprecedented step that has the potential to change the dynamics of global energy markets and affect economic relations between the two countries. Further developments will depend on the willingness of both sides to engage in dialogue and seek compromises to restore stability and mutually beneficial cooperation. Canada's cessation of oil exports to the United States is an unprecedented step that has the potential to cause significant changes in the geopolitical and economic landscape of North America. Let's consider the possible consequences and scenarios for future developments. Possible implications for the economy and energy. Rising fuel prices in the United States. The cessation of Canadian oil supplies could lead to a shortage of raw materials for American refineries, especially in regions dependent on imports from Canada. This, in turn, could lead to higher gasoline and diesel prices for American consumers. Searching for alternative suppliers, the United States could turn to other oil-exporting countries such as Saudi Arabia, Venezuela, or Russia to compensate for the losses. However, this could increase dependence on unstable regions and affect geopolitical relations. Developing domestic production, the United States could increase its own oil production, particularly shale oil, to reduce its dependence on imports. However, this would take time and significant investment. Economic losses for Canada. The United States is a major market for Canadian oil. The cessation of exports could lead to significant economic losses for Canada, including a decline in GDP and the loss of jobs in the oil industry. Possible scenarios: diplomatic settlement and resumption of trade. After a period of tension, the countries could sit down at the negotiating table and reach new trade agreements that would allow oil exports to resume and normalize relations. A protracted trade war: if the parties cannot reach a compromise, the trade war could drag on, causing further economic losses and forcing both countries to seek new markets and suppliers. Reorienting Canada to other markets: Canada could step up efforts to diversify its oil exports by expanding cooperation with countries in Europe and Asia. This could include investing in infrastructure to transport oil to ports and negotiating new trade deals. Domestic political changes: the economic difficulties caused by the trade war could lead to a change in political leadership in both countries, which could in turn affect the future direction of their relationship. Conclusion: the cessation of Canadian oil exports to the United States is a serious challenge for both countries. Future developments will depend on the willingness of leaders to engage in dialogue, find compromises, and adapt to the new realities of the global economy. In any case, this conflict highlights the importance of diversifying economic ties and the need to strengthen international partnerships. In an unprecedented move that could send shockwaves through the global energy markets, Canada is contemplating halting its crude oil exports to the United States. This potential action comes as a direct response to escalating trade tensions initiated by the U.S., including the imposition of a 25% tariff on Canadian imports. Such a bold measure by Canada could have profound economic implications affecting industries and consumers on both sides of the border. Background of the trade dispute: the current strain in U.S.-Canada trade relations began when President Donald Trump announced significant tariffs on steel and aluminum imports, citing national security concerns. These tariffs have been met with widespread criticism from U.S. allies, including Canada, which views them as unjustified and detrimental to the long-standing economic partnership between the two nations. In retaliation, Canada has considered imposing its own tariffs on U.S. goods and is now exploring more drastic measures, such as restricting energy exports. Canada's consideration of oil export restrictions: Canadian officials have indicated that all options are on the table in response to U.S. trade actions. Energy Minister Jonathan Wilkinson has suggested that non-tariff retaliatory measures could include restricting oil exports or imposing export duties. Such actions would primarily impact the province of Alberta, Canada's leading oil producer. While Alberta's premier has opposed such measures, the federal government is weighing the potential economic and political ramifications of reducing energy exports to the U.S. Reuters. Potential economic impacts: the United States is heavily reliant on Canadian crude oil, importing over 3.7 million barrels per day, which constitutes more than half of its total crude imports. A sudden cessation of this supply could lead to significant disruptions. Global edge: rising fuel prices. A reduction in Canadian oil imports may cause gasoline prices to surge, particularly in regions dependent on this supply. Refinery challenges: U.S. refineries, especially those configured to process heavy Canadian crude, may face operational difficulties and increased costs in sourcing alternative feedstocks. Economic ripple effects: industries reliant on affordable energy, such as transportation and manufacturing, could experience increased operational expenses, potentially leading to higher consumer prices and slowed economic growth. Global energy market repercussions: the potential curtailment of Canadian oil exports to the U.S. could have broader implications. Market volatility: a significant shift in North American oil trade dynamics may lead to increased volatility in global oil prices. Supply chain adjustments: both Canada and the U.S. may seek alternative markets and suppliers, leading to shifts in global energy trade patterns. Geopolitical tensions: energy supply disruptions can exacerbate geopolitical strains, particularly if nations compete for limited resources. Canada's strategic considerations: while the idea of restricting oil exports is being considered, it's important to note that such a move would also have significant repercussions for Canada. The U.S. is the primary market for Canadian crude, and finding alternative buyers would be challenging due to infrastructure limitations and existing trade relationships. However, Canadian officials are exploring options to diversify energy export markets and reduce economic dependence on the U.S. Conclusion: The contemplation of halting oil exports to the United States underscores the severity of the current trade dispute and highlights the complex interdependencies between the two nations. As both countries navigate these tensions, the potential economic and geopolitical consequences remain profound, emphasizing the need for diplomatic engagement and mutually beneficial solutions.
Subscribe and like, please. Bye bye.